Hi everybody, Will Alexander from Will Alexander's Dog Show Tips, brought to you by Canine Chronicle TV and ProPlan, nutrition that performs. Don't forget to press the like, share, and subscribe button. Today's special guests in the time capsule are Enid and George Wright, the daughter and the son-in-law of the late, great Clifford Hallmark. So sit back and relax and enjoy an afternoon with Enid and George. Hi everybody, today we have George and Enid, right? Enid is the daughter of Cliff Hallmark, and George is obviously the son-in-law. Hi guys, how are you today?
We're good.
I'm as good as I can be.
All right. Things are well there right now?
It's hot.
Yeah, it's hot.
Very, very hot.
You don't want to be out doing gardening, put it that way.
No, it's too hot. Even here, it's too hot to go outside and do that stuff. So. Can you tell me how your dad got involved in dogs, Enid?
Yes, sure. Well, the story really starts with my grandfather. My grandfather came over from Liverpool, emigrated to Canada, joined the Canadian Army, and fought in World War I in the Battle of Vimy Ridge in France, which is how he and my father got the kennel name, Vimy Ridge. And then he moved after the war down to Chicago.
We walked over the border.
Or however he went. And my father was born in Chicago in 1920. And so my grandfather was interested from the get-go in wire fox terriers. And then in 1926, they moved to LaGrange, Illinois. And my grandfather built a kennel. He started boarding, grooming, handling, breeding wire fox terriers. And so that's how he would have gotten his initial start in dogs.
And you've even got the book he used to keep all his records in. Yeah.
Yeah, my grandfather had this old ledger book where I can see the year he started building the kennel, how it was going, all his dog formulas for growing hair, if your dog had this problem, if your dog had that problem, all this kind of stuff you would probably never do nowadays.
Yeah. Hi.
And so my father would have started going to shows with his father, in the late 20s, I'm going to say, in the Illinois. That's all right.
It's dinner time, so they're all bugging me.
Oh, really? Okay. We put our dogs. We put our dogs away. So, so his first show would have been in the Illinois, Kentucky, Ohio area, I'm going to say, something along those lines. I know he talked about going to shows via train with his father, back in the day. And I know he spoke about Mr. Marvin and his father being their competitors in wire fox terriers. So, he did that for a while. And then when he was a teenager, he got a job offer to work for a colonel in Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
It probably sounds more exciting than it was, but it was a Colonel R.L. Davis who had Davis Hill wire fox terrier kennel. So my father went to work for this Colonel R.L. Davis in Kentucky when he was a teenager, and he was there for a few years. And while he was there, one of the dogs that was bred in the kennel was a dog called Davis Hill Little Man. He loved this dog. He thought the world of this dog. He thought this was the best wire fox terrier he had ever seen. Unfortunately, Mr. Colonel Davis sold this wire to Forest Hall of Dallas, Texas. And we know Forest Hall's kennel was called Hall Wire. And this dog, Little Man, went on to sire he was an influential sire for him. He sired quite a few litters. And we know Forest Hall bred over 100 wire fox terrier champions. And later in life, he became a judge. And my father went on to win a best in show with a wire under Forest Hall with Mermaid's Maestro. So the circle was complete, So George remembers that my father was unhappy when this dog was sold.
Yeah.
And so that's why he left. He left. So he came east to Long Branch, New Jersey.
No, your grandfather came from.
Yes, but to where my grandfather was already the manager of a wire fox terrier kennel at this time. So he was the manager of a wire fox terrier kennel called Sea Swing. Not a kennel I don't think many people are familiar with, but anyway. So he lived and worked there with my father, went to shows with him and showed, wire fox terriers, maybe some other breeds, I'm not quite sure. I know here in the East, I remember him saying their competitors in wires were Jean Bigelow and her father, who had Rayleigh wire fox terriers. And so after that, he went up to Long Island and he took a job as an assistant to Len Brumby Sr., who was the handler of Champion Nornay Saddler. And he worked there for a few years. And he met a lot of people while he was up in Long Island. And so while he was there, he would tell us the story that Len Brumby liked to trim his dogs at night. And so his job was to hold that dog like a statue while Len Brumby trimmed the dog. Not in a noose or, anything. He had to hold the dog. So the dog would stand perfectly still. And another, actually, fox terrier person worked for Len Brumby at the same time, Phyllis Haig. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she went on to judge. My father had a brief engagement to Phyllis Haig while the two of them were there. Yes. So, yeah. So he left there and he started going to shows. I'm not really sure whether he went to shows so much on his own, but he went to shows with people, more or less. So one of his influential mentors that he went to shows with was Pop Sayers, so Ed Sayers Sr. And he showed a lot of carries. And he was, all carries, okay. And he was sort of responsible for modernizing the Kerry Blue as we see it today for the trimming and things like that. So while he was on Long Island, he met all the Murphy brothers, and George can tell you who they are.
Who's the Murphy? Well, there's three brothers.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know this. It was Johnny, Jimmy, and Harry. Harry was the last one to come over. Harry came over in 1946, 47. That's Desmond's father.
Okay.
And because Jimmy and Johnny, they came in the 30s sometime. But and they were born just about 7 or 8 miles from where I came from, in a town called Glenboig, just outside Glasgow. Glenboig was owned by, it was a town, but it was owned by two brothers, the Chapman brothers. And they had Heather kennels of Scottish Terriers. I mean, you go back in Scotland, you'll see Heather. They sold a lot of dogs over here, and people went over there. And that's how Johnny was the first one to came over, and but somebody gave him a job in a kennel. It was in New Jersey somewhere, I don't know where. And then Jimmy came after that. Johnny got him a job, but Jimmy told me this, he says, nothing like your brother to do you a favour. He said, he's working in a Scottish kennel. He gets me a job in an Airedale kennel. He said, what was a brother for? So then, and then Harry, he was in the army. Harry was a prisoner of war.
Okay.
And this is, maybe a lot of people know this, maybe they don't. So was Roy Holloway, was a prisoner of war. The two of them were in the same prison camp in Europe, but they didn't know each other. It wasn't until Harry came over here and he met Roy and they started talking. They'd been in the same prison camp in France or Germany or wherever it was. So that's the story, the Murphy brothers. And
he met the Sayers brothers. So, so I said he went to shows with Pop Sayers. Yes. So then there were 3 brothers there. There was Ed Sayers Jr., who went to work for Mrs. Dodge, who ran Morrison Essex or sponsored Morrison Essex. And then there was Henry Sayers, who was a terrier handler. and was married to Ruth, and then eventually married to Barbara Worcester.
Yeah.
And then the other Sayers brother was Joe Sayers, who went on to become a veterinarian and a breeder of Irish Terriers. Yeah. And he met of course, he met all the Brumbies. So, and he was friendly with all of them. I mean, the East Coast was Terrier Central at one time. Long Island. But the East Coast, I mean, George Ward and his father lived in the East, and
no, I never.
Yeah.
No, his father never came.
His father. Okay,
his father lived in Ontario.
All right, I thought his father came down here for a while, but George lived in the East.
George came down and he worked for an Airedale kennel as well in Madison, New Jersey. Right?
Yeah,
I've heard that story plenty of times.
And so during this time, my father showed for a few, many people, but one of the stories he tells was he showed a dog for Captain Nicholas, who is Anna Catherine Nicholas's father. He showed a smooth fox terrier called Champion Pocono Prince. Now, this was around the same time that Brumby was showing Nornay Sadler. And my father always maintained, and I guess you could prove it if you could go back and look, that it's at some shows when the two dogs were entered, they wouldn't show Sadler because they never want Sadler to be beaten. And so, so my father said he did think Pocono Prince was as good a dog or could beat him, maybe not every time, but on occasion, and not maybe under the right judge. So, but he was a lovely dog. And we have a picture of him, as I say, somewhere. And one day we'll put it online. Yeah. And so an interesting fact that Mr. Austin, who owned Sadler, was the stepfather of Betty Fell, who had Badgewood Kennels and went on to be influential in Norfolks and breed many Norfolks and Whippets. So.
And Jackson worked for her.
Right, and she was a judge as well.
So did, I think Harry Murphy did work for her too.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of money out on Long Island at one time. Yeah, in dogs. Yeah. So.
The Gold Coast.
So then my father went into the Air Force for the war, and he was a tail gunner, and he went over and was stationed first in Northampton, and then in North Africa. Okay, Northampton, England, and then in North Africa, and then Italy. Right. When upon occasion he would show us his bullet wound in his leg. So yeah. So after the war, then he came home, and by this time his father was living on Long Island. He had bought a kennel in Westbury. And so I think my father started working out of his kennel and showing dogs on his own. So so that would have been after the war. And then I couldn't tell you all the people he showed for then. At some point he did meet the Worcesters, who were very influential in his life.
That wasn't until the 50s.
The 50s, you're right. Yeah. So he met my mother at a dog show. She was showing it.
Well, yeah, okay.
No.
Because your sister also married a dog person, a handler, or her sister also married a dog handler.
Right. Her sister Vera, married Doug McLean, who served in the Army in the Canine Corps. And so they met at a dog show. And actually, Doug's sister Marion married a handler, Ed Conrad.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah. Who was a terrier handler, and they ended up moving to New Hampshire at some point. But so it's incestual, right?
It's like all intertwined.
Yeah. So my parents, met at a dog show, because my mother got interested in dogs by working as a teenager for a chow kennel in a town near where she grew up. It was called Elshire, and the woman's name was Mrs. Prinz, and in Ridgewood, New Jersey. And so she started going to dog shows with her, and she worked at the kennel. She would tell the story how all the chows would be out, and when it was feeding time, you'd have to go in with a chair. And as you put down the food, you'd have to fend the chows off, and put the food down and work your way around, so you could get out safely. Yeah. So they actually met in a chow ring. The story goes that my father stepped on my mother's dog foot, So her dog went lame and he could win. So.
That was your mother's story, but who knows?
Well, he never said otherwise. So they got married in 1952. And so the other story goes is each one thought the other one had money somehow. Because
well, that's one before.
Yes. My mother went to Cooper Union at night. She had gotten a full scholarship. And during the days, she worked in PR in the sort of textile fashion industry. And one of the people she worked for was a man who was a furrier. And he would lend her fur coats. And she would go to the shows in these luxurious fur coats. And so my father thought, well, she's got money. Yeah. And my mother always thought my father had money because he was well-dressed. And he probably was spending money like there was no tomorrow. My father wasn't.
He loved to spend money.
Yeah, and he was a generous person, so he would have spent money. So she would have thought, wow, he has money.
And actually, at that time also, his buddy was Roy Holloway. Roy lived. Where did he live then? That must be when he went to Canada. No, Roy told me when we were in Long Island, because Roy told me I used to go to your grandfather's house.
Oh, really?
And at that time, he said you couldn't get a drink in Long Island. You had to go into New York City on a Sunday if you wanted to get a beer. And they would go there, and the two of them would go into the city for a few beers. No. So that was him and Roy. They were real buddy back then, he told me.
Yeah, well, actually, Roy was my godfather.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they got married in 1952. And the story goes, my mother was late to the wedding. They got married.
She's always late.
Which a fact that remained for the rest of her life. After the wedding, actually, they each went back to their own homes. My father went back to his parents' house. My mother went back to her parents' house because they had nowhere really to go at that point. So they did go on a honeymoon, and then he decided he would take a private job, and he went to work for Edgerstone Kennels. So he worked privately for, she was Mrs. Epley then, she was Mrs. Wynant before that, but her husband had committed suicide after the war, and then she remarried, but she kept the kennel and her interest in dogs. And so he worked for her for 3.5 years. And so while he worked for her and showed her dogs, my mother worked for General Motors in New York City in the public relations department. Yeah. And so after she
apart though.
No, she commuted. The kennel was in Valley Stream, New York. So my mother commuted. Yeah. So they weren't living apart. Yeah. And so after she closed the kennel, she decided that was the end of dogs for her. She let everyone have the choice of 2 dogs. So my parents chose a Westie and a Scottie. And I can't remember exactly the relationship of the Westie to another famous Westie, but one was either the mother of Edgerstone Valley Belle or something along those lines. The Scottie, I don't remember. Anyway, nothing came of the 2 dogs they got. The Westie, no matter how many times they bred her, never had a litter of pups. So they weren't lucky that way. So then after that, they eventually moved to Mendham, where, in the sort of mid-late 50s, and that's where they stayed. But somewhere during this time, they met up with the Worcesters, Mrs. Worcester, Florence Worcester, who was I guess a great woman. She was very outgoing, very generous. So she and her daughter Barbara had Wishing Well Kennels, and they lived in Little Falls, New Jersey. And Mrs. Worcester had been a past president of the Westie Club, I think, many times over. And actually, Barbara and her mother were founding members of Ramapo Kennel Club. So they had, can vaguely recall going to the house in Little Falls. It was, a lovely house, And then they had a kennel, they had a wishing well there, of course.
Wishing well, yeah.
And it was a rather substantial place. I know I've heard nowadays that it's a huge housing development there. So, so my father showed for Barbara on and off. And Barbara they bred a lot of dogs. They had wire fox terriers, Scottish terriers, West Highland terriers. And Barbara didn't just have my father show for her. She had, many handlers, George Ward. Because George says to me something I didn't know. He said my father told him that my father actually finished Simon, Elfinbrook Simon, for Barbara. Then they
fell out. They fell in, they fell out, they fell in, they fell out.
And so then the dog went to George. But my father did show Symmetra Snip for Barbara and went best in show at Montgomery with that dog. And the last dog he would have shown for Barbara was a Westie called Champion Pin Money Puck in the early 70s, 73, 74, something like that, who was a top terrier. And that was her last dog with my father. Although when Mrs. Jones died, the owner of Harwire Hetman of Winladder, Barbara did want to buy that wire fox terrier, as did many people, but it just wasn't meant to be. So, but the last show I can remember Mrs. Worcester being at was Montgomery in 1974, when my father went best in show with Braid Home White Tornado by Nate.
Was she there that day?
She was. I can remember her sitting by the Westie ring with Dr. Kirk Judge. So I'm sure that was her last Montgomery. Whether or not that was her last dog show, I really couldn't say. So, my father had a very interesting and varied life. He had been married 2 times before he married my mother. Married and divorced, I'll qualify that. He, when they were in New Jersey, he met Mr. Milton Fox and his wife Nell, who had Pleasant Pastures Australian Terriers. And he actually, this is before the breed was recognized, and he helped Mr. Fox, the 2 of them, wrote the standard for the Australian Terrier.
Wow.
Yeah, and so when Mr. Fox died, though, he and Mrs. Fox didn't get along so well. So that sort of came to an end. Although Mrs. Fox had given my mother an Australian bitch, and she bred it. And my mother actually bred the first Australian Terrier to win a terrier group. And it was called Vimy Ridge Cricket.
Wow.
Yeah, so a little interesting side note there. So.
Your father also showed the first Border Terrier to go best in show.
Yes, he did. Yeah, so that was owned by Mrs. Seaman, and he had bought that dog for her over in England. And yeah, it was Dr. Huggins who gave him that first best in show. And actually, WAG went on to win the national specialty 5 consecutive times, which is almost a better feat than winning that best in show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But he also bought other border got best in show.
Okay.
What was his name? My memory going, when I was over, the dog he bought on the bus going to Border Union, the woman had the Border Terrier.
Oh, Basil.
Basil, yeah.
Yes, I don't remember. That was the last border
that was the last border he showed, and you got best in show with him as well. So and then Border didn't get best in shows, so that was like 2 best in shows within 5 or 6 years for Borders. Wow.
But in the 60s, my father went over to Britain a lot to buy dogs. He started then. So he met a lot of people who were influential in his life over there. Joe Cartledge in particular, helped him find some of these dogs. And, he bought a Border Terrier, Dandy Howe Shady Lady, from Mrs. Sullivan of Dandy Howe Kennels. He was very friendly with the Dennises of the Branston West Highland Kennels. And he was also very friendly with John Morris of the Moormaids Wire Fox Terrier Kennels. And eventually he met up with George over there.
Tell us a bit about that, George. When you came over here.
I met him at Windsor. No, it wasn't Windsor. It was the Scottish Terrier Club of England. They always had the like the national specialty the day before Windsor. And they had it at the Ascot Racecourse, which Ascot's changed a lot. You ever watch the horse racing from Ascot? No. Aye, people are not interested, just dogs. Anyway, it's a great race course, and they had the dog show there, and that was 1969, and there was a lot of Americans there. Dr. Kirk and his wife were there. Johnny Murphy was there. Doug McLean was there.
My father showed Scotties for Dr. Kirk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cy Rickle was there from Texas. A lot of people from America, North America, came over for those, like the Scottish, they were Scottish people, and for Windsor. So that was that then. The next day at Windsor, I was showing a Westie bitch, and I won the CC with her, and they were watching Westies.
Let's say her name, George.
Her name?
Yes.
No, I can remember. Champion Czech Bar Revney Rye. But I had finished her son that year. She wasn't finished. The people who had bred her, and they had this young dog, and I wouldn't go into the story, but it was a really nice dog. I came out, and over there, I finished him in like 10 weeks. We don't have many shows. He won at the Westie National. He got the CC, Westie National. What was the other show? I remember I finished him at Leeds. I got his first CC in March, Manchester. His first CC at Manchester in March. His second CC at the Westie National under Miss Wright. No relation. She owned the Kelowna Kennels.
So he says.
Yeah.
Kelowna West Highland Kennels. And I finished him under at Leeds Championship show, and Les Atkinson. Did you ever know Les? No, you wouldn't have known Les. You know Judy Avarice?
Heard the name.
Well, that was Judy's father. He was a great guy, and he was a young guy, and we were in terriers. If you had something good, he put you up with it. He liked to help. If you were young, I was like about 19 then. He'd go his way. Oh, the old guys were there and say, hey, you up there. No, he put you up.
He went best in show at Crufts with the Lakeland Terrier.
And Judy, his daughter, went best in show at Crufts with a Welsh Terrier. So I got to know all those people. But anyway, I'm showing this Westie bitch, and I went with her. And they're all there, they're watching Westies. And Johnny Murphy said to Clifford and Doug McLean, I don't know who else was there, they said, one of you guys should take that kid back over to the States with you. So I had Clifford ask me if I wanted to come, so the rest history. I came over, I stayed for 2 years, I went back again, then I came back again. So that's how we met. And we were very good friends. We always stayed in touch, even when I went back over to Scotland. Actually, I bought the dog, Braidholm White Tornado. And Clifford, I told Clifford, I got this Westie here. This is a good helmet. I came over, saw him. He bought him, and he got best in show from the classes at Montgomery.
No.
No. Was that the next year? He won the breed from the classes, I know that.
Okay.
Sure he did, right? Under,
I'm saying nothing.
under
The year he went best in show, he was a special, I'm sure, under Dr. Kirk.
Cat, but he won the breed the year before under Sheila Clellan.
Okay.
Right? So, no. I'm sure I'm right.
Okay. All right.
So I bought that dog.
We'll look that up later.
So,
Okay. Call me and tell me.
Yeah.
so that's the story of me and Clifford and all those old guys from over here. Right?
When you came over here, George, your first show, what did you think? You know, was it different?
Bloody awful. It'd been a lovely summer for once. They actually had a real summer in the United Kingdom. The weather was brilliant. I get here on 2 days before, the Thursday before Somerset Hills and Westchester. And first of all, arrived at Kennedy. And you come out, and it was so goddamn humid and hot.
Yeah,
that off way.
You could cut the humidity with a knife. It was one of those days.
Nice. Oh, it was awful. And then I went to the first show. It was only like 15 minutes from where Cliff and Lois lived in Far Hills. And that was Somerset Hills. And it started to rain. Must have been at 5 in the morning, and it rained. We were up to our ankles in mud, with chairs down, crates on it. I said, what the hell, this is bloody awful. No, I'm all cramped under a tent and that. But it dried up in the afternoon before the groups. And I said, I still remember that day. And I met Fisher that day. Bobby Fischer was showing a Kerry Blue of his own.
Okay.
He actually had a Kerry, champion Kerner Fergus McCroy. And he was a nice dog, lovely dog. He had him looking lovely. And I remember going over and looking at him, and Bobby wouldn't mind me saying this. He looked lovely. But if this dog could only have moved. I mean, he was a picture, right? But he was not good. But when he went away from you, you had to turn your head away, right?
Okay.
And
oh no, Bobby won't mind you saying that.
Yeah, well, who the hell cares? What's this? And you're like, no, maybe he'll say, well, George is right. No, they'll care. And he was a lovely.
George is blind.
He was a nice dog, and Fisher. But that day, I always remember the.
Did he win the breed that day?
What?
Did he win the breed?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, he won the breed a lot. He got a couple of best in shows. Peter showed him once, and got best in show with him, because it was only like last year, the year before. Ernesto asked me. He said he found an old dog book or something, and he had a picture of Peter with going best in show with his Kerry. And I said, "Do you remember?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "That was Fisher's dog." Oh, he says, "I wonder why it looks so good." He didn't know I was actually Bobby's dog. And they got a couple of beds, but that day, Tony Stam, the Ann Stam Scottish Terriers, he did the group. And Peter was showing the Farrells Lakeland Special Edition. He won the group. Clifford went second with Diego Hubert and Westy. Ali Ayres went third with Gymnast, Dougal, Celium, and the Dandy went fourth. And I don't know the Dandy's name, but it was that German guy.
Hugo Wright.
That's the German guy had it, and he had somebody show some nice Dandies. So I always, that stuck in my head from that day. The next day was Westchester, and it was a beautiful day. And it was a great entry. I mean, the Kerry Blue specialty there, and somebody from England who judged, maybe Miss Parry, do that. But it was a beautiful day. And that's the first time I met Jimmy Murphy. And Jimmy only came down from Massachusetts. He lived outside Boston. And he had a Kerry and maybe a Westie or a Scottie. He only had 2 or 3 dogs. At that time, Jimmy never went to many shows. That's the first time I met Jimmy as well. That first weekend, I met a lot of people. I met E.J. Carver, Alan Levine. I mean, a lot of people, they're all gone now, and something, their name might pop into my head, but I met a hell of a lot of people the first 2 days I was in this country.
You and Clifford used to spend a lot of time, well, not a lot, but some time in Canada. Because I actually remember meeting Clifford. I think it was in a show in Quebec. But you both came up a lot, showed up. There's a story about going to Barrie one year, the Barrie Kennel Club.
Yeah. Well, we came up, I don't know, it was like, it would be this week, it would be after, it would be, no, next weekend. It would be the end of July. and we came out. I think we went to like 10 shows. There was a lot of shows.
You circuit that week.
Yeah. And yeah, it was interesting. I had a good time, but he won every group except one. Well, I won 2 groups. He had a wire dog. What was his name? Gregor. And I won 2 groups with him. I won one under Miriam Waite.
Yep.
And one under, I think I went under New Egberg.
Oh, great! Yeah.
Yeah, and he won. He won another 7 where Westy had Pagan Ghost, and so with that, the only time he got beaten the breed in Westies one day with a guy. Oh God, what was his name? I think he came from New Brunswick on the East Coast. It was Hood. His name was how some people you never forget. The guy had fish eyes.
Oh, there you go.
Fish eyes. And he beat Clifford and Westies. Oh, Clifford was he wasn't a happy camper. He came out that ring. How did he put up that? And the guy could hear him. Like, he didn't give a shit. And so he says, "That's it. I think it was the last show. Man, we're getting out of here." I said, "No." I said, "The wire's on at 1 o'clock or something. Show the wire." "No, we're leaving." I said, "Show the wire." I said, "You have a good chance of winning the group." I said, "Under this ass." I said, "He doesn't know anything." I said, "Chuck Herring is doing best in show." I said, "If you win the group, you'll get best in show." "Well, okay, we'll show the wire." So he shows the wire. Because I figured out in my tiny little Scottish brain that they're going to have lunch together, the judges. And this guy's going to say to Chuck Herring, "Who's this guy with the Westie? He was cussing at me and all the rest of it because I beat him in the breed." I said, Chuck Herring's going to say, "Well, you shouldn't have beat him in the breed." No, there was a dog that Dennis Neola had. No way I should have beat him. I said, "We'll see what happens." So Mr. Who does the group, puts the wire up in the group, the second, and Clifford goes best in show under Chuck Herring. So he's getting, right after the Terrier group was the last group. So right into best in show, he goes best in show. So he's up with Chuck and he's getting a picture taken for best in show. And there's Mr. Hood standing there like a beaten little dog, no, looking, and as if, well, at least I got something right that went best in show. So Clifford gets a picture. Mr. Hood says to him, "Oh, would you like a picture with me for the group?" Clifford, "Why would I want to get a picture with an ugly da-da-da?" I would see what he said, like you, and walked away. And the guy, poor guy's left standing there. You wouldn't get a picture with him. That was one of the many. No, one of the funniest days was, and he saw it was at Bucks County Dog Show. And you have been to Bucks County. It's never changed. The setup never changed.
It's a great show.
All that. So he's on the dog ready. So Terriers will see in ring 7. So they're on, I don't know. It started late. It was some reason in the morning, but I remember Westies were in the afternoon. For some reason, the heat of the day, and they've got Westies on. So he goes over to the ring. And these 2 little old ladies, they're right at the entrance to the ring with a little table, and they've got either lasso apses or Shih Tzu. So he looks at them and says, "Get them to hell out of here." "What do you mean? You shouldn't be. Get those tables away." He had a chair with him. He was coming to sit down at the entrance to the ring. And he said, "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't have those tables. Get those to hell out of here." And the woman turned around and said, "You Terrier people think you own the dog show." He said, "You've got that right, lady. We do. Move." They moved. I felt sorry for him.
He sounds like a tough character. What I understand, he was pretty soft, actually. He was quite a soft.
Oh, yeah. He put on the hard thing. Have you met at a dog show? Some people say, "Oh, grumpy old man," that. But away from the dog show, it was entirely different. No, but very different. No.
Yeah, he was really a sentimental person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he loved kids. He loved encouraging kids at dog shows.
Yeah.
I was like 10 or 11 when I first met him, and he was great with me. So.
What did he actually say to you? Do you remember?
We just talked about terriers. We're sitting there watching the terrier ring, and it was I'm sure it was, I want to say it was I'm not sure it was the Montreal show, because I think it was in a hockey arena, because for some reason I feel like we were sitting on a bench, like the hockey bench, watching the dog show. And I think back then Airedales were my favorite terrier, and I think I was asking about Airedales. I didn't know who he was at that point.
Right.
It was just I just remember the whole experience. I still remember it, so obviously it was a positive one.
Yeah. But he didn't suffer fools. Let's put it that way. And he paid attention to his dog at the show. If you were coming over to chit chat, he was busy with his dogs at the setup. He would just turn his back to you. He couldn't be bothered, you know. So.
But
I'm sorry.
The dogs he had, I mean, he went best in show Montgomery 4 times. 3 times with Westies. Right? One was Barbara's, some extra snip. Then he went best in show with Diego Hubert. He went best in show with White Tornado. And who was the Scotty?
Blanart Bewitching.
Who, again, that Scotty bitch actually won the group at the Garden. But the owner showed it because Hart and Clifford came to a parting of the ways again.
Well, they had a falling out. What that was, I don't know. The story went, she begged him the morning of the Garden to show her that day, and he refused. I don't know if he was ever sorry that he did. Probably not, though, knowing my father. He probably wasn't sorry in many ways. So.
What were some of his favorite dogs? Do you remember? Well, obviously the Westies.
Yeah, he did have a few. So, yeah, Harry, Harwire Hetman, and the wires that he loved. And he loved Mermaid's Maestro.
And Barrister.
Yeah.
The Garden.
And he loved that wire, Little Man from way back in the day. And then he loved Diego Hubert, who was really a great show dog for him. And he loved White Tornado. And then he loved a boarder called Dandy House Shady Lady, who lived in our house until the end of her days. And then he also loved a wire fox terrier called Shearwater Suntan, whose name was Joy. And he showed her for a Mr. Hill that lived here in New Jersey. And he actually ended up giving her to my father because when we were young, I'm going to say I couldn't have been more than 3 years old. She was in a whelping box in their bedroom, and my sisters would have only been a year old in their cribs, and she was in a whelping box in their bedroom, and she started barking one night. He's yelling, "Shut up, shut up," and she wouldn't shut up. If anything, she became more insistent till he finally got up to see what the heck was going on when he could smell smoke. And so he realized that she was alert, and so there was a fire. And so, she saved us. So we all got out, the dogs all got out, and he didn't want to ever part with her. She was our savior. And till the day she died, he took care of her. She was the star at one of my birthday parties. Everyone posed with her when I was a kid. And when she was getting older, he would make tea because he was convinced that tea was the elixir of life. And he would serve her tea, Joy needs tea today. And so she was he really did love that dog.
There's a soft side, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
He's remembered as one of the greatest terrier handlers of all time. What advice do you think he would give to today's terrier handlers?
Well, okay. Well, he would just say, learn your craft, learn the history of the breed.
Read the books.
Yeah, read the books. You know, don't just be somebody who takes a dog in the ring and you're paid for it. You know, really know your craft, because, you know, with terriers, a lot of the handlers truly are artists when it comes to trimming their dogs. Yeah, and he would say, and know your own self-worth, and always be paid for what you do, you know. So I think that would be his advice, and he would be encouraging to any young person that wanted to be involved in dogs, because I think he thought it gave him a great life, you know, a life that he couldn't have had in many other ways, because you meet all sorts of people, you know, and you go to all sorts of places and you see all these wonderful dogs, and it can be a wonderful life, you know. So I think he would, you know, be encouraging that way.
Wonderful life. Look how you met me. Think about it. If I had been for dogs, we would never have met, right? No, exactly. No.
I can't remember. I knew you, but I got to really know you. We were in Montreal, and you lost the breed in Westies. I think you were showing, it might have been Pilot, and you were very upset. Who was judging, though? You're really, it was a woman. I can't remember who.
Oh, I remember her. Mrs. Oh, God.
He was really upset that you were so upset. I can't remember who it was, though.
I asked her, Madam, could you tell me why you put that bitch over this dog? It was Alistair I was showing.
Oh.
Asking Alistair to him. And she said, oh, I liked it better. And I said, in what way? Oh, I just liked it better. I says, Madam, my 4-year-old daughter could give a better answer than that. She called the bench show committee on there.
Oh, it's coming to me. I was starting to remember it. It was a Canadian woman, because you came to me and you sort of yelled at me about her. I can't remember who it was.
And so you're responsible for her, right? Because you're Canadian too. Yeah.
Oh, I ended up here.
But I said, you know nothing about West Highland White Terriers. I'll tell you a funny story. A couple of years later, more than a couple of years, maybe it was 10 years later, Bert Tormey.
Margaret Robertson.
That's a Robertson. I knew it was a Scottish name. That's a, yeah.
Sorry, it just came to me.
Oh, a fellow Scots person.
So.
Makes it worse.
Oh, it's got to be more than 10 years later. Bert Tormey came up to me and he said, do you know a lady called Mrs. Robertson? And I said, I'm thinking locally. No, I don't. I said, no. He said, I was judging out in Washington State last week. He said, and we were at the judge's dinner. He said, and there's this Canadian woman, Mrs. Oh, I said, yeah, I remember her now. He said, she started talking to me. We're having a nice conversation. And she asked Bert where he came from. And he says, I live in Connecticut. And with that, she said, do you know a handler down there called George Wright? And Bert said, oh yeah, I know George Wright. She said, do you know what he said to me in the ring? And Bert said, no, so she tells him. And he said to me that he could teach, what was it he said? He could teach me about terriers. And Bert looked and says, I probably could. He said, she never spoke to me for the next 2 days.
Margaret, I remember you were hot.
She never forgot me, that's for sure.
I'll just say, back in the day, though, Bert Tormey would have been exactly the same.
Yeah. She didn't forget me. No.
But you made an impression, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. The everlasting.
Not a good one, though.
What the hell? It's only a dog show.
Yeah.
What do you think your dad would think of today's dog shows?
Well, the shows are, you know, sort of the same in some ways, you know, that they're conducted the same. There are no Foley guys anymore, though, unfortunately. You know, they knew everything that was going on in dogs, really, more than the handlers did.
Right.
But anyway, he would be shocked that at the end, at the low terrier entries, you know, and he would be shocked that one of his favorite shows, Monmouth County Kennel Club, was no longer exists. So I just think he would be surprised that you don't see the breadth of breeders there once were, you know. So I think all those things.
And there's basically no what you would call real kennels anymore. You have a person who breeds a bitch once every 2 years and they think they're going to breed a great one. They don't have the kennels where they bred 10 litters a year and you could turn them out one after the other. But it's just a changed world. Well, I mean, it's just a changed business.
Right. It wasn't uncommon, I'm just going to say, in the 70s, at least I can speak to that period very well, that he would have a Westie class bitch, dog, and a special, and the same for Scotties and wires. And, you know, that just sort of doesn't exist anymore. And like George said, a lot of his clients were people who were breeders, who were interested in a breed and were members of their local dog club. And they would breed a litter every 2 years, and they would keep something, and that would be the dog they would show, and they would give that dog to my father to show, and that just sort of really doesn't exist anymore. Yeah,
You're right.
it's just a sort of a shame. It is a shame.
It really is.
It's in Canada, right?
Well, for sure.
It's through dogs.
Yeah, but we had more depth than we do now.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's just sort of missing. Yeah, and then people just don't keep the numbers of dogs they once kept, you know. It's almost, we went through a period of time where you were frowned upon if you kept too many dogs, you know, but really that's how the good breeders really, you know,
Well, for sure.
you know.
They rarely lucky you have one litter and have a great one. So
Yeah.
I bet you, I've got this one, it's great. And you look at it and say, it's all in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah. So I'll just tell one more story that, okay, so I told you the sort of the sentimental one of my father. Here's another side of my father. So when I was a kid, I'm going to say maybe, 9 years old, it was the early 60s. I went on the New England circuit with him. So we had a couple shows in, and then one show we did not have a good day. I think he got beat with everything, or his the two dogs that he would have shown in the group. And so he said, okay, the terrier group was going in. We're packing up. We're leaving. I said, okay. So we packed up. We got in the van. But instead of heading for the exit, we headed for the terrier group ring. And then, yes, we were in the van, and he decided we were going to circle that terrier group ring. And he was going to shake his fist and honk the horn at this judge, which he proceeded to do while we circled the ring 3 times before we finally left the showgrounds. Yeah. And if you're going to ask me what happened the next day, I no longer remember. I must have blanked that right out of my mind, but I've never forgotten that. How everybody in that group ring turned to stare at us as we're driving around the ring while he shook his fist at the judge. Yeah. So that was the other side of him, the side that didn't want to lose, you know.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to try that next time, though. No.
Yeah, I definitely advise it, yes.
Well,
But, yeah.
Where did George go? Did we lose George?
We lost George a minute. He has somebody picking up a dog he groomed earlier.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that we need to cover?
No, well, I'm just going to say, well, going back to how, there are more shows than there ever were nowadays, right? We'll see 3 or 4 day weekends, but back in the early 60s, they were only 2 show weekends. And so because they were only 2 show weekends, you'd get tremendous entries. There would be majors at every show and everything. And there wouldn't even be shows every weekend, every of the month. So one year in the early 60s, my father finished 35 Scottish Terrier champions. Yeah. So
That's not happening.
that was, well, it's just circumstances would never let that happen again, So, and the only other thing I would want to say is that he'd be proud of his grandchildren. He'd be proud of my daughter continuing in dogs. And my son Matthew, he would, who looks just like him in many ways. Yes. He would share the same interests. My son's a golfer. My father was a golfer, and my son's interested in getting, not a terrier, unfortunately, but getting a Nova Scotia duck trolling retriever.
Okay.
So, but at least a continuance in dogs at any rate. So he would be proud of that. Yes. So.
I really appreciate your time, Enid. It's been a
Okay. Oh, you're welcome. Oh, here's George.
I'm back again.
Any final words, George?
final words, George.
I had to go and collect some money. Final words. I don't know what to say. Because yeah, just the dog world's changed. Not only in North America, even go over to the UK, Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales. A lot of the good old breeders, they've all died off. And there's nobody taking their place.
Yeah.
The entries have went down. I mean, one show I was at a couple of years ago, it's 10 years ago, we went to Windsor, and how that dog show had changed.
Oh, when we went over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was only like...
Well, there weren't CCs in every terrier breed. That
No,
was for sure.
there was only like 6 or 7 Lakelands in those CCs, right? The biggest entry, I think, was it Norfolk's?
Maybe.
The unreal Norfolk's were one of the biggest entries, right? There was only like 12 wires. I mean, it just completely changed. Okay, you go to cross a national terrier, you get a bigger entry. But the other championship shows, I went to Border Union show, that'd be 2 years back, the Scottish Kennel Club, 2 years ago. And I went over to the English Cocker ring. There was only like 14 English Cockers. Now over they used to have, back when I was a kid, back in the 60s, 70s, there'd be 70 or 80 English Cockers, right? Yep. And it was unbelievable. It just went downhill. No. So.
My drink.
Maybe it will rise again, but we live in hope. But
yeah, people have to be more interested than in just showing dogs. You have to be. We need the breeders back as well. You know.
The breeders back, and one last thing I'll say: a lot of young people coming into dogs today, they might go the weekends and work for a handler for a year. Then they decide they're going to be a handler. And they'll be picking up dogs and be running around, and all they want to do is pick up a dog, go in there and be a star for 2 minutes, run round and round, right?
Yep.
So it's just changed, no. And I see, I don't know if it's like in Canada, but I see them here all the time. Well, I haven't seen any this year, but last year, you see them all, and the kids, and they all want to be, they're only like 16, 17, and that, but they're handling dogs.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, my father served an apprenticeship, as did George, you know. So I would say most terrier handlers have, you know.
You have to, any of the breeds, even not just terriers,
yeah.
Learn about them. That you have to have a background before you're willing to take someone's money to show their dog, I think.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Bloomsburg
Hopefully, let's hope the shows just continue like that, the way things are going. I guess there's a show going on right now in Bloomsburg, I think, right at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to Canfield next week. My daughter wants to go. She entered 2 dogs, so.
Right.
So I'm going to Canfield.
You see the entries there? 3,700 dogs on the Saturday.
Great. Yeah.
We're back to the way it used to be. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got majors. Actually, I couldn't believe it. I saw, Scottish Terriers, there's like 9 class dogs and 10 class bitches. You know, we got that. There's 6 wire bitch in the classes.
What does that tell
I
you?
mean,
Maybe we should have fewer shows.
Exactly. Maybe this will be a big reset button for our dog world.
Yeah.
That'd be
But,
nice.
the Kennel Club just wants to have all these shows. They've got to get in the money. No.
Well, let's hope. Let's hope it goes back, because that's. I miss them, and I like the bigger shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're more exciting.
Again, thank you for sharing your time with me, guys. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I hope you stay safe, and I'm sure I'll see at least George somewhere.
I don't know where. Well, I won't be this year, that's for sure.
The border is closed, so it will be no time soon.
Without that.
Yeah.
Do that.
And I'm entered in some shows down there, but I can't go. So
Do that. You can sneak over the border at night.
yeah. All right, guys. Again, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Will.
Have a great day, and thank you so much for your time. I really.
Sure. You're welcome. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Right.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you both for a very enjoyable afternoon. The memories were flooding back. It was incredible. I loved every minute of it. So don't forget to press the like, share, and subscribe button. And if you like what you're seeing here, don't forget to message me at dogshowtips@gmail.com. Or if you want to just find out what's going on at Will's World, just go to willalexander.net. Until next week, guys, take care of yourselves.